Hey, good evening and welcome to Freedom, Speech, and You. I'm Ken, your host. Tonight we have the topic MLK Day, impeachment and documents, and so much more. And we're coming to you from the virtual living room provided by Wes Webb. That gets rid of all the discussion about whether I can play the piano because the piano isn't real. So, hey, welcome. So, we will start off with MLK Day, and that being on Monday. And you can't read that possibly at all. So hang on. Let me make that bigger. But this is the government info on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's getting close to being big enough. See if we can we make it bigger than that? That's probably big enough to read at home. It was observed on the third Monday in January. It celebrates the life and legacy of a man who brought hope and healing to America, commemorates the timeless values he taught us through example, those values being courage, truth, justice, compassion, dignity, humility, and service, things that so well defined Dr. King's character and empowered his leadership. So on this holiday, we commemorate the universal unconditional love, forgiveness, and nonviolence that empowered his revolutionary spirit. He wrote in a letter from Birmingham, Alabama, while he was in jail on April 16, 1963, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one greatly affects all indirectly," end quote. And they note that that's engraved on the north wall of the MLK Memorial. It was President Reagan who signed into law on August 27, 1984, established the commission to assist the first observance of the holiday, honoring Martin Luther King Jr. And on January 18, 1986, he again signed a proclamation marking the first observance of his birthday as a national holiday. But in 1994, President Clinton signed the Martin Luther King Federal Holiday and Service Act, expanding the mission of the holiday as a day of community service, interracial cooperation, and youth anti-violence initiatives. In 1999, Title IV United States Code was amended to add the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday to the list of days on which the flag should be displayed. So that's the history behind it. There are additional resources that you can go to. So it mentions that. We can go to AmeriCorps as being the official agency charged with leading the Day of Service effort. So it says that you can go there, and you can go to photographs of Dr. King on the Library of Congress. And this article is old, and it talks about free days last year. So obviously, for whatever reason, the article has not been updated for this year. I'm not sure why, because that is new and current, and that's what's on the website, unless they're waiting to update it tomorrow. So, not sure why. So, welcome to the chat. And let's see. We had I don't know, is Jim here yet tonight? Look over the chat. Looks like we have Mr. Webb, Aaron, ADM, Florida Girl 38, Annie, WW, Norma, Rosebud briefly appeared and then left, Embezzler, Jackie Rasbaruni. So these are the people that are here tonight. Good to have all of you here. Jim's not here, so maybe I'll hold off on Jim's topic and wait to see if Jim pops in. So I will go to this next topic because hey, Arrow Kitty. The GOP is constantly talking about this now, this next topic. So GOP talking about the fact that Biden, Jim, hi, welcome. GOP constantly talking about the fact that these documents were found with Biden and they want to, hey, Dixon, they want to investigate Biden over the documents because they, quote unquote, think that President Trump was attacked over things that he did that were illegal. So, but today there's an article on NPR that says Senator Warnock supports special counsel in Biden classified documents case. So let's read into that. That article's by Teresa Metla. Yeah, I guess that's the way you pronounce her name. And we have videos popping up. So
anyone going through a natural disaster, it's always going to be
and of course
hard to understand
advertisements. Okay, so the article begins, the Department of Justice was right to appoint a special counsel to investigate President Joe Biden's handling of classified documents, Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock said on Sunday. When appearing on ABC this week, he told co-anchor Jonathan Karl, quote, classified documents are to be taken seriously and they're to be handled with a great deal of care and no one is above the law. So I'm glad to see the Justice Department doing its work and we ought to let that work proceed. That was what the senator said. White House has acknowledged that multiple sets of documents with classified markings, including those from Biden's time as vice president, were found at an old office that Biden used at his home in Delaware. On This Week, Jonathan Karl pressed on Warnock, asking, quote, the White House knew about this back in November, even before the midterms. Do you think they should have told us about this earlier, end quote. Warnock responded with, quote, the Justice Department is engaged in the investigation, and that's one of the questions I think that we'll explore, and I don't want to get in front of the investigation, end quote. Norma, you're here. I can see you. He continued with saying he was, quote, glad to see that the president and his administration are cooperating. I think so too. I'm glad to see that the president is cooperating because our president is cooperative with the law. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced Thursday that a special counsel, Robert Hur, would lead the investigation in the Biden documents. Now, the article doesn't tell you, but Robert Hur is a appointee of President Trump. So, hey, Scotty B, good, welcome. Good to have you here. White House has stressed that this was Biden's team that first flagged the materials to the government, and they intend to cooperate. They intend to be cooperative. I started to say that differently. I started to say they intended to cooperate. Okay. Warnock continued, we need to get to the bottom of this so we don't see this kind of thing happen again. He made that statement on This Week on ABC. The recently elected senator was also asked about his priorities in the, quote, incredibly divided Congress, end quote. I presume those are Jonathan Karl's words, where Democrats hold a 2-seat majority in the Senate and Republicans have a 5-seat advantage in the House. Warnock touted being, quote, the 18th most bipartisan senator in the Senate. Let me say that again. He said he was the 18th most bipartisan senator in the Senate, which he linked to his background in the church. Since the year 2005, he's been a senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist in Atlanta. Warnock stated the following, quote, when you're a pastor, you have to welcome and embrace whoever comes through the door, and I look forward to getting good things done for the people of Georgia and for the American people, end quote. Okay, this article just jumps from this to this. It's like they left out a part. So let me read what it says. It says that, but there were limits to those negotiations, including raising the debt ceiling. The federal government will soon reach, risking a historic default on debts. Doesn't even seem to go with the article. Republicans have called for a borrowing increase to be tied to spending cuts, which the House has rejected. So where did those two things go together? It's almost like we jumped articles here. Strange. I guess they're making a comment about his bipartisan nature, but it just seems like they left out a whole paragraph there. So they're basically saying that he would be bipartisan, but he would limit his actions to being more a Democrat, and so, and we're going to talk about debt ceiling tonight. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So we'll probably hit on that. But he talks about being bipartisan. He has endorsed Biden's expected reelection bid and played down his own ambitions for the White House. And he did so telling Jonathan Karl to look at his life, that he was a junior senator from Georgia, that he's going to continue to lead the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and that he has children ages 6 and 4 who he has to take to Disney. So he's got more things to do than run for president. And we're going to talk about this tonight also, that Biden went to the Ebenezer Baptist Church to speak. Dr. King would have turned 94 on Sunday. And Warnock was asked who currently embodies Dr. King's moral leadership. And the senator pointed to King's memorial on the National Mall. Quote, a black man who grew up in the segregated South, who came into the 20th century to articulate the meaning of the American dream, perhaps more effectively than anybody. So he didn't really name anyone, it looks. But he says, quote, if what it shows any one of us, if we're deeply committed, if we're driven by the North Star of our moral compass, if we center the concerns of other people rather than ourselves, we can have an impact in a powerful way. So what he's basically saying is, he's saying that he's not naming any particular person to be the embodiment of Dr. King. He's basically saying that anybody who strives to be like him can be like him. And that's a good statement. So it was a little bit of a rough article, but a good topic. Okay, so Jim is here. So Jim asked me if it was possible to reverse the impeachments on President 45, or as we sometimes call him, former President Trump. And he wanted to know about that on tonight's show. So here we go with something about impeachment. So this is going to have to be scaled because you can't possibly read that from home. Okay, I will paraphrase. The Constitution provides House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. Okay, so note that. Check that. House of Representatives. And the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. Again, note that. So the House can impeach somebody, the Senate can do the actual process. But no persons shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of members present. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the USA are subjected to impeachment if they violate the law. It goes on to detail that this originated in England. It was later used by the American colonial and state governments. It was adopted by the framers of the Constitution. It's fundamental to the system of checks and balances. And Congress charges and then tries such officials in federal government for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. The definition of high crimes and misdemeanors was not specified in the Constitution and has long been the subject of debate. Therein lies the problem, because one side of the government says it's not a high crime and misdemeanor, and the other side says yes, it is. In the impeachment proceedings, the House charges the official by approving by simple majority vote articles of impeachment. After the House sends its articles of impeachment to the Senate sits in high court of impeachment to consider evidence, hear witnesses, and vote to acquit or convict the impeached official. A committee of representatives called managers act as prosecutors before the Senate. In the case of presidential impeachment trials, the Chief Justice of the United States presides. The Constitution requires 2/3 vote. Okay, there again, the 2/3 vote of the Senate to convict. And a penalty for an impeached official upon conviction is removal from office. In some cases, the Senate has also disqualified such officials from holding public offices in the future. There is no appeal. You cannot appeal it. So there is your answer. You cannot appeal a impeachment proceeding. So Republicans saying that you can appeal a impeachment proceeding, currently you cannot. Since 1789, about half the Senate impeachment trials have resulted in conviction and removal from office. So there's no appeal. So that's what the United States Senate itself, the document, has to say about it. Now, the other thing that we have on this subject is an article from Government Track Insider, or GovTrack Insider. And let me scale that before I even bother to bring it to the screen. All right. So the article addresses the subject. Articles from today. Who is the writer of the article? It doesn't really say, does it? This picture is Representative Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican, Oklahoma, 2nd District. So we'll see how he pertains. Hi, Casper, welcome. And hi, Ira, welcome. The article starts off with a humorous, no word on whether the Library of Congress cafeteria would also be required to stop serving their peach mint crumb cake. There's a dad joke on every page. So the article puts in context. In the final month of 2019, the House impeached President Donald Trump on 2 counts of abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Trump had withheld almost $400 million in congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine, unless the country agreed to investigate Joe Biden's son Hunter's business dealings in the country. We saw that on television. We saw news reports about it back in that year. In February 2020, the Senate acquitted Trump on both counts, so he remained in office for the remainder of his term. The article notes the chamber was controlled by Republicans at that time. In other words, the House impeachments were something of a slap on the wrist, but Trump faced no actual consequences. Consequences. I'm probably mispronouncing that. No, Blueberry, you're not blocked. As a result, Democrats still celebrate it as something of a partial victory. Whatever happens, he will be impeached forever, said Nancy Pelosi. Others felt differently. Should they expunge the impeachment in the House? They should, because it was a hoax, said Trump. So this is what's floating around now. The new House resolution would retroactively reverse and expunge Trump's 2019 impeachment charges. But would that even be allowed? If we look at the document before says you cannot appeal. So for them to appeal, they'd have to create an appeal that doesn't yet exist. The article continues, nothing in the Constitution explicitly precludes Congress from taking an impeachment back, although neither of the 2 other House impeached presidents in history, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton, saw their charges expunged. But there is an arguable precedent from 1837 when the Senate in 1837 officially reversed their earlier 1834 censure of President Andrew Jackson. The new measure was introduced in the House on March 29th as House Resolution 1010 by Representative Mark Wayne Mullen, Republican, Oklahoma, 2nd District. Okay, so he threw that in back on March 29th of last year. So it's been floating around that long. What supporters say. They argue that impeachment was wrong in the first place and it's never too late to do the right thing. Oh my goodness. If only they would do that in practice themselves, because they're constantly not doing the right thing. So Mullen said the following in his press release. This impeachment was an unimaginable abuse of our Constitution. Unimaginable? Dude, you lack imagination. That's all I got to say. Anyone can imagine anything. Have you not watched any any movies lately or read any fiction, sir? Democrats in Congress put politics over country, he continued, and threw all democracy out the window to unseat our president. Nope. What unseated your president was the fact that the American people in mass numbers voted against him. He continued, this is exactly what our founding fathers warned against. While we cannot undo history, we can make it right. This resolution will bring credibility back to the impeachment process and ensure this manipulation never happens again. That's his quote. Dude, manipulation happens all the time. Isn't that the essence of government? But anyway, the article says, as you can imagine, he voted against both impeachment counts. Yep, I can imagine that. What the opponents say. Opponents counter that Trump's actions actually appear worse in the eyes of recent history from the subsequent 2+ years rather than better. Now, why would they think that? Well, I mean, we can go through the article, and I will, but one of the reasons why is because in the 2.5 years since we've had the Jan 6 hearings, and we've seen exactly what he did. So let's see if the article agrees with me. As outrageous as Trump's misconduct appeared at the time, it looks even worse now. This is Steve Bannon writing for MSNBC. Kevin Madden, a Republican strategist, recently told NPR, there's just a lot of evidence, this is his quote, that Trump was wrong on this issue, in parentheses, Ukraine, and that in many ways we undermined the NATO alliance and we undermined, and it puts in parentheses again, Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky's position in the eyes of Russia and Putin. In other words, the world is still dealing with the consequences of Trump's dangerous misconduct. The odds of passage of this are as follows. The resolution has attracted 7 co-sponsors, all Republicans. It awaits a potential vote in the House Judiciary Committee. Odds of passage are low in the Democratic-controlled chamber. And see, that's the point. If they want to introduce any changes, they've got to get it through the House, because the House would set the rules under which the impeachment or the removal thereof occurs. The House is controlled by the Democrats, so it's not very easy to pass this in a democratically controlled House. The Senate might be the body that actually impeaches someone, but the Senate can't write the rules under which the impeachment happens. Only the House can. So therein, is what happens. Therein, this is a stunt. It's a proposal. It probably won't go anywhere. And so that's what's going to happen. This article continues that former Representative Steve King introduced a resolution nullifying Trump's impeachment back in December of 2020, with a mere 3 days left in Congress. It attracted no co-sponsors and never received a vote, although such a late introduction was presumably meant more as a stunt bill than a serious proposal. Of course it was. It was a stunt. So how much of this is really a stunt? Probably a lot of it. Never put it past the Republicans to play stunts just to use it as a political football to kick them forward. For a football reference, on a day with 3 football games, how about that one? Score 1 for me. There's there's a little bit of thing here too. And I had a personal comment from one of our chatters. Hey, Crystal, welcome. And I don't know if she is here tonight, but we're still going to talk about what she said on this subject. So see if I can put that page up. So this question of the ability to remove a drawing a blank, sorry. Ability to remove an impeachment drew a comment from one of our frequent commenters. And she's not here right now tonight, but she did give me permission to use this on the show. And Connie Kelly had the following to say on this subject. She said, even if the House did pass something, they would not be able to erase the millions of articles written and out in public about the impeachments. Plus, if they did try something this dumb, they would be totally ridiculed about it for years to come. History would not be kind to them. They're looking to, quote, take the heat off the 15 votes for speaker. I thought it was interesting when a GOPer was asked if Biden is investigated for documents, then why shouldn't Trump? He replied that Trump has already been investigated to hell for 4 years. So Connie put in parentheses, so I guess if you're investigated for tax fraud, you get a pass on murder. That was Connie's wonderful comment, and I wanted to include that in this show. So that is from Connie. Thank you, Connie, for that input. Okay. This is a good one. Now, we just talked about earlier the Trump and Biden documents, or did we? I think I mentioned it. But if I didn't mention it, now I am. So let me scale this up before I take it to screen too, because that'll make it better. I don't know if that's going to make it bigger. Okay, it finally went bigger. There we go. Look bigger like that. So that's probably good right there. Hopefully so. Okay, so you hear all this talk about what Biden did and the fact that the documents were found on his property. And so this politics article on NPR compares the two. Yeah, of course, we get an ad pop in here. Go away, ad. And let me see if I can make that bigger now that the picture is off the screen. Well, the words are bigger. That'll work. So the article goes, the revelation that classified materials were discovered at a think tank office formerly used by President Joe Biden, as well as the president's Delaware home, has prompted questions on how the circumstances compare with the seizure last year of hundreds of documents marked as classified from Mar-a-Lago, the Florida residents, their words, not mine, of former President Donald Trump. It's not a residence, people. It's a club that he owns. A side-by-side look at the similarities and differences between the two situations. So they start off by going, how many documents are we talking about? For the president, it's unclear precisely how many classified materials have been obtained. Richard Salber, special counsel to the president, said Monday that, quote, a small number of documents were classified markings, end quote, were discovered on November 2nd in a locked closet at Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, a think tank in Washington, as Biden's personal attorneys were clearing out the offices. Biden kept an office at this place after he left the vice presidency in 2017 until shortly before he launched his 2020 presidential campaign, was affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania, and continued to operate independently of the Biden administration. On Thursday, Salber said a second batch of documents with classified markings, a small number, in quotes, he said, had been found in the storage space in Biden's garage in Wilmington, Delaware, with one document being located in Biden's personal library in his home. By comparison, for former President Trump, roughly 300 documents with classified markings, including some at top secret level, have been recovered from Trump since he left office in January 2021. In January 2022, the National Archives and Records Administration retrieved 15 boxes of documents, 15 boxes, telling Justice Department officials they contained a lot, in quotation marks, of classified material. In August, FBI agents took 33 boxes. So 33 more boxes for a total of 48, and containers of 11,000 documents from Mar-a-Lago, including 100 with classification markings found in the storage room and an office. Now, another comparison would be how quickly were these things turned over. For Biden, after the materials were discovered by the think tank, Biden's personal attorneys immediately alerted the White House counsel's office, which notified NARA, which took custody of the documents the next day. So immediate notification, next day retrieval. In quotation, since the discovery, the president's personal attorneys have cooperated with the archives and Department of Justice in a process to ensure that any Obama-Biden administration records are appropriately in the possession of the archives, end quote, said Salber in a statement. Excuse me for a moment. I'm going to mute my microphone so I can take a drink. So talk amongst yourself. Okay, part of that cooperation, Salber said this week, included Biden's personal lawyers examining other locations where records might have been shipped after Biden left the vice presidency in 2017. The search concluded Wednesday night. Biden told reporters at the White House on Thursday, though he did not say when the second batch of documents was found. Salber said the Justice Department was, quote, immediately notified, end quote, after the documents were found at Biden's home, and that department lawyers took custody of the records. The revelation that these additional documents were uncovered by Biden's attorneys came hours after White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre dodged questions about Biden's handling of classified information in the West Wing's management of the discovery. She said the White House was committed to handling the matter in the, quote, right way, end quote, pointing to Biden's personal attorney's immediate notification of the National Archives. By comparison, what did Donald Trump do? A Trump representative told NARA in December 21 that presidential records had been found at Mar-a-Lago nearly a year, people, not immediately, a year after Trump left office. 15 boxes of records containing some classified material were transferred from Mar-a-Lago to NARA in January. A few months later, investigators from the Justice Department and FBI visited to get more information about classified materials taken to Florida. Federal officials also served a subpoena for some documents believed to be at the estate. By August of 2022, FBI agents retrieved 33 boxes. The search came after lawyers for Trump provided a sworn certificate that government records had been returned. So they lied. Good evening, Jolie, and welcome. They lied, saying that all this stuff was returned and 33 more boxes were obtained. The article now compares, could either president face charges related to this discovery of documents? From President Biden, despite the discovery of classified materials, there's no indication he himself was aware of the existence of the records before they were turned over. Now you're wondering, how could that be? Well, he is the former vice president. So let's just theorize that he had the documents, he looked at the documents, he asked somebody else to return the documents to the office, because that is highly conceivable that a vice president would say, oh, by the way, return these documents to the office tomorrow. And somebody would say, yes, Mr. Vice President, I'm going to do that. And then they don't do it. If you can let Trump, and I emphasize this, if you, a potential Republican, can let Trump off and say he didn't know he had the documents, then you also have to let Biden off. Now, when you see the documents in Trump's possession and you see that the folders have been opened and the folders are empty, you cannot at that point say that he didn't know that he had the documents. Because when you have empty folders, as it has been proven, hello, Benny Loco, and welcome. When you have empty folders that once held these documents, then you can't say that he didn't know that he had the documents. That's the difference. Administration also said that the records were turned over quickly without any intent to conceal. Correct. They didn't go and say, oh, we got these documents. We can't possibly let anybody know about these documents. We have to go hide these documents, and let's get so-and-so to take these documents back to where these documents belong. Nope. They notified the appropriate agency in the US government, told them they had the documents. The agency came to get them the next day. There was no attempt to conceal it. The article continues. That's important because the Justice Department historically looks for willfulness or an intent to mishandle government secrets in deciding whether to bring criminal charges. Now, let me take an aside. One of the shows that I listen to is Stephanie Miller's show. And Malcolm Nance was on Stephanie Miller's show. And he describes this incident where he was going to an assignment. And he also was going to have a medical procedure done, some kind of exam. Doesn't matter what kind of exam it was. And his medical records were provided to him. And he goes and he opens up his medical records. And he sees that classified information is in his possession, information that relates to things that he's working on at that time. He's just supposed to have the medical records inside this folder. So what does he do? He goes and notifies the appropriate agency and says, hey, I've got these records that pertain to this job that I'm doing. These are classified records. So he turns them in. They tell him, yes, sir, you got these records. These are the records that you're supposed to have for the job that you're on, but they weren't supposed to be in with your medical records. But they sign it off and tell him, it's okay for you to have these records. So again, willfulness to mishandle or handling the records properly. So President Biden and his lawyers have handled this properly. And a special counsel will find out if they disagree. The article continues, but even if the Justice Department were to find the case prosecutable on the evidence, the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel has concluded that a president is immune from prosecution during his time in office. Former special counsel Robert Mueller cited that guidance in deciding not to reach a conclusion on whether Trump should face charges as part of this investigation in coordination between the 2016 Trump campaign and Russia. Again, we're getting into this topic of, you can't excuse Trump for it and then blame Biden for it. After the discovery of the first batch of documents, Attorney General Merrick Garland asked U.S. Attorney for Northern District of Illinois, John Lausch, one of the few U.S. attorneys to be held over from Trump's administration, to review the matter. According to a person familiar with the matter but not authorized to discuss it publicly. Meanwhile, we get back to Trump and his abuse of documents charge. The former president possibly faces exposure for obstruction over the protracted battle to retrieve the documents. You think? Yeah, dude, carried it on and on and on and on and on and tried to say that he could just wave his hand over the documents and make them unclassified, as though he's some kind of Jedi or something. These aren't the documents they're looking for, And since he's no longer in office, he wouldn't be afforded protections from possible prosecution that would apply to a sitting president. Yay! Go get him, federal government. In November, Garland appointed Jack Smith, a veteran war crimes prosecutor with a background in public corruption probes, to lead an investigation into Trump's retention of classified documents, as well as key aspects of a separate probe involving the Jan 6, 2021 insurrection and efforts to undo the 2020 election. Good evening, Kelly, and welcome. Hey, hello, Lorenzo. Kelly pops in to say the following. I'm popping in to say I'm working on my YouTube show right now. My show is going to be at Lisa Marie and her history with Scientology. Okay. That should be interesting, Kelly. What did the presidents have to say about the discovery of the documents? President Biden, answering questions from journalists at a North American Leaders Summit in Mexico on Tuesday, said he was, quote, surprised to learn, end quote, that documents had been found at his think tank. He said he didn't know what was in the material, but takes classified documents, quote, very seriously. He said his team acted appropriately by quickly turning the documents over. And he continued with the following, quote, they did what they should have done. They immediately called the archives, end quote. On Thursday, Biden told reporters at the White House that he is, quote, cooperating fully and completely, end quote, with the Justice Department investigation into how these classified and information and government records were stored. As vice president, Biden would have had the power to declassify some documents, though he hasn't said that he declassified the ones found in his think tank offices or Delaware home. So he would have had the power to declassify some kinds of documents, but he hasn't mentioned anything about that. And I would venture to guess because he probably doesn't know what documents were found yet. That's not his job at this point. His job is to cooperate with the law, turn over the documents, and let the law do its thing. Besides which, if he were to, in November, when the documents were found, if he were to go in and ask them, hey guys, what documents were found, then he would have knowledge of the documents. So if he didn't know the documents were there, he is better off having no knowledge other than to say, guys, you're my lawyers, turn these documents over, obey the law. That's it. Don't ask what the documents are. Don't get involved in the machinations of what they are. Just turn them over. In September, speaking of the situation with Trump, Biden told CBS 60 Minutes that discovery of toxic documents of Mar-a-Lago raised concerns that sensitive data was compromised and called it, quote, irresponsible, end quote. Meanwhile, in comparison, Trump, who had ability when he was a sitting president, again, as a sitting president, not as a private citizen after office, to declassify documents, claimed at times that he did so regarding the documents that he took with him, though he has provided no evidence of that. He said in a Fox News interview in September that a president can declassify material even by thinking about it. I'm not a holder of classified documents, but I would tend to think, without even searching, that if a document is declassified, then you got to stamp it with a stamp that says that it's declassified. Because presumably it was stamped with a stamp that says it was classified in the first place. So you would have to stamp it with something that says declassified, and it would have to be signed by the person that's what I would think, that declassified it. Like, on this date, President declassified this document. Don't you agree? Former president has called Mar-a-Lago search, quote, an unannounced raid. That was, quote, not necessary or appropriate, and represented, quote, dark times for our nation. Is that why they called Biden Dark Brandon? Does anybody know? Again, I need a break for water, so talk. Biden, Trump weighed in Monday on his social media site asking, when is the FBI going to raid the many homes of Joe Biden, perhaps even the White House? That's a direct quote from Trump. So the article asks, what are these political implications? Well, Biden's disclosure could intensify skepticism among Republicans and others who are already claiming that politics is the basis, for the probes of the former president. And there are possible ramifications in the new GOP-controlled Congress, where Republicans are promising to launch widespread investigations of Biden's administration. New House Speaker McCarthy said, quote, I think Congress has to investigate this. We don't think there needs to be a special prosecutor. He said the latter sentence contradicting members of his party. Top Republican of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Turner of Ohio, has requested that intelligence agencies conduct a damage assessment of potentially classified documents. Now, regarding former President Trump, in his immediate aftermath, Trump and his supporters seized the Mar-a-Lago search as a partisan attack from Democrats who had long been desirous of removing him from office. During a campaign launch in November, at the same club agents had searched months earlier, Trump referenced the probes against him, casting himself as a victim of wayward prosecutors and the festering rot and corruption of Washington. Those are his quotes. So there's your comparison. Wes says intelligent people work for the FBI. They don't hire or promote slackers. Crystal Anderson says hypocrites. Yes, they are. Welcome back, Aaron. Lorenzo says, I get it. Why don't our leaders? Well, leaders tend to worry about politics, not what's good and bad, I guess. We alluded to this earlier when I was talking about Senator Warnock, because it was in the article about Senator Warnock. So hang on. Just ignore that error. There's some this error up here has to do with the fact that it can't load some kind of audio player, and I know if I touch it, it'll just open another ad or something, probably. I mean, I can try. See if I can get it out of there. No, it doesn't want to go away, so ignore that error. So the next topic is about our president becoming the first sitting president to deliver a Sunday sermon at Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. There's our president. Can I make that any bigger? See if I can. There we go. That works. And that got rid of the banner, except to put the banner at the bottom. But now you can't read the banner because the banner is kind of underneath my photo, so that'll work. Biden delivered a sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta today, becoming the first sitting president to do so at the church where MLK Jr. was pastor. Speaking in front of the church, Biden said the following, quote, I've spoken before Parliament, kings, queens, leaders of the world. I've been doing this for a long time, but this is intimidating, end quote. Dr. King served as the pastor of the historic church until his assassination in 1968 at the age of 39. Senator Warnock of Georgia, who is the church's current pastor, invited the president to deliver the sermon on what would have been Dr. King's 94th birthday. Sorry, having to drink a lot of water. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a nonviolent warrior for justice who followed the word and the way of his Lord and Savior. On this day of remembrance, we gather at Dr. King's cherished Ebenezer. That's a quote from President Biden. The speech lasted 25 minutes, and the president touched on both King's faith and his commitment to equality. He said he felt humbled to achieve a historic milestone. He spoke about King's legacy and called the Reverend one of his heroes. But the sermon quickly turned political as Biden discussed economic issues and voting rights, saying the following, quote, "This is a time of choosing of the direct choices we have. Are we a people who choose democracy over autocracy?" That was the end of that quote. Prior to this sermon, Biden released a proclamation on Friday reflecting on the holiday and similarly touching on voting rights and health care, saying that his administration calling on Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. In the proclamation, Biden said the following, quote, "In keeping with Dr. King's campaign for economic justice and rights of workers, my administration is striving to make the American dream a reality for every family," end quote. During his speech, the president said, quote, "The battle for the soul of this nation," end quote, continues today. He discussed a range of current affairs, including the recent appointment of Supreme Court's first Black female justice and the political turmoil in Brazil. We touched on that last week, the political turmoil in Brazil, where there were people that were attacking their capital in the same manner that people attacked the Capitol of the United States on January 6, 2021. So we showed that video last week. Biden concluded his speech by describing a bust of King that currently lies in the Oval Office, reiterating that King is one of his inspiration. There's also another bust in his office, according to Biden, of Rosa Parks. The president once again asked listeners to continue to work toward the country's progress. He said the following, quote, "Folks, for God's sakes, this is the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity if we set our mind to it," end quote. The president's sermon comes amid news that the Department of Justice is investigating the president after classified documents were found at his Washington, D.C. office and Delaware home. Okay, we talked about that earlier. Biden also recently completed his first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border as president, while Republicans continue to spar with the Biden administration over its immigration policy. So that is, I think we talked about that last week. Did we talk about him visiting the U.S.-Mexico border? Chime in on chat if we didn't. But that's that article. Hello, Elizabeth. Welcome. This article is by Juliana Kim and Scott Horsley, and it's about the debt ceiling. It's an article from yesterday. Okay, article about the debt ceiling. Hitting the national debt's a major worry for Washington right now. As recently as Friday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned the U.S. is on track to reach the debt limit or the cap on how much money the federal government can borrow by Thursday. The ceiling was last raised to $2.5 trillion in December of 2021 to total $31.4 trillion. In the past, Congress has avoided breaching the limit by simply raising it, but House Republicans said they will not support increasing the debt ceiling this time around. Not unless they get spending cuts or other concessions. In a letter to congressional leaders, Yellen said deadlock around the debt ceiling can cause irreparable harm to the economy and even global financial stability. She harkened back to 2011 when the U.S. reached its debt limit, wreaking havoc on the stock market. If there's a stalemate, a few things can happen. First, the Treasury will begin to move money around to cover the shortfall in cash flow. But these actions only last for a few weeks or months. Once those measures run out, the government will have a hard time paying its obligations like Social Security or Medicare. Once again, here we go with the Republicans holding Social Security and Medicare hostage because they don't want to spend the money. Money that all of you have paid in to the system as U.S. citizens. So far, the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt, but Yellen warns that if Congress fails to act, that may happen as soon as June. Debt ceiling has been raised often, but this time it could be different. Congress has a pattern of raising the limit, but the decision is never easy. Speaker McCarthy told President Biden that Republicans are interested in imposing a spending cap in exchange for temporarily raising the debt ceiling. He pointed to a 2019 spending deal between his predecessor and former President Donald Trump as the model. The agreement including bolstering spending for defense and domestic programs. Ha ha ha, no surprise. They always want to keep defense and domestic programs, but they always want to cut something else that everybody needs. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Biden is not interested in negotiating. She stated the following in her press briefing on Friday, quote, "It's not and should not be a political football. This is not political gamesmanship. This should be done without conditions," end quote. The article says the last time the debt ceiling was hit was in 2011, and it rattled the markets, sunk stock prices, and took a toll on people's retirement savings. It was also the first time that the federal government saw its credit rating downgraded. I don't know how many of you remember 2011. My personal memory of 2011 was that they were renovating my wife's place of work. That's the thing I remember the most because my wife lost her job in that year. And I remember struggling because one paycheck disappeared out of my household. And that was what I remember most of that year, but maybe some of you remember the year more. Although the country avoided defaulting, the Treasury found that delays in raising the limit bruised the economy, which took months to recover. So far, the markets are assuming this debt ceiling crisis will work out, but the 2011 debt ceiling breach shows that even brinkmanship can hurt investors, consumers, and businesses. So there's not a whole lot in there. There are a couple of linked articles in there. There's a linked article about the credit rating being downgraded. There's more about the press briefing. So go to NPR if you want to read more about that. But it seems like we're always talking about the debt ceiling. They're always saying you can't raise it. But the minute they want something, they raise it. This one is one I definitely want to talk about tonight. Because all we ever hear the Republicans talk about is the 2020 election and their alleged claims of voter fraud. Well, you want to talk about voter fraud, Republicans? Here you go. An Iowa official's wife is charged with 52 counts of voter fraud in congressional race. Sioux City, Iowa. The wife of the northwestern Iowa county supervisor has been charged with 52 counts of voter fraud after she allegedly filled out and cast absentee ballots in her husband's unsuccessful race for Republican, underline that, Republican nomination to run for Congress in 2020. So you want to talk about voter fraud in 2020? Which party's doing it? The Republican Party. Kim P. Taylor, 49, was arrested Thursday and pleaded not guilty to the charges before being released on personal recognizance bond. Her trial is scheduled to begin March 20th. Prosecutors allege in the indictment unsealed Thursday that Taylor filled out voter registration forms or delivered absentee ballots for people in the Vietnamese community of Sioux City who had limited ability to read and understand English. She filled out dozens of voter registrations, absentee ballot request forms, and absentee ballots containing false information, and delivered absentee ballots, sometimes without the knowledge of the people whose names were used, according to the indictment. Pat Gill, who is the county auditor and election commissioner, said Thursday that he notified the Iowa Secretary of State's office after someone contacted his office because a ballot had been fraudulently cast in their name in November 2020. He said his office later provided the FBI with suspected fraudulent registration forms and absentee ballots. Taylor committed the fraud before June 2020 primary, in which her husband, Jeremy Taylor, a former Iowa House member, finished a distant third in the race for the Republican nomination to run for Iowa's 4th district congressional seat. The winner of the race, Randy Fenestra, easily won election to Congress by November. Prosecutors contend that Fong Taylor committed the same fraud before the November 2020 election in which Jeremy Taylor was elected to the Woodbury County Board, according to the indictment. He's not named, however, in the indictment and not accused of wrongdoing. Her attorney, John Greer of Spencer, Iowa, declined to comment on the charges the Journal reported. So there again, once again, Republicans claim the 2020 election was fixed, but they fail to mention the part that they're the ones responsible for it. So, okay, we talked about that. We talked about that. We talked about that. Talk about this one. Okay. So this one I just saw the headline. I haven't read this one. DOJ appeal in Texas mass shooting case pleases NRA and puzzles gun control advocates. This is by Deepa Shivram, if I'm saying her name correctly. It's been more than 5 years since the mass shooting in a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, that killed 25 people, including one pregnant person, and injured 22 others, putting the death toll at 26. A district court ruled in 2021 the government was 60% responsible for the massacre after shooter Devin Kelly was discharged from the Air Force after felony conviction, wasn't entered into the national database that would have prevented him from buying a gun, and judge said the government also owed victims $230 million in damages. But in court documents filed this week, Department of Justice pushed back on paying damages and denied that they were primarily responsible for the shooting, a move that gun control advocates say not only harms victims and their families, but also a backward step for Biden administration's own stance on gun control policy. Aaron Davis, senior counsel at Brady, a gun control advocacy organization, told the following to NPR, quote, "We think the government should hold itself accountable for its failures in this case, and I think they should provide these families with a small piece of justice they deserve," end quote. Department of Justice spokesperson Diva Iverson said in a statement that the Department of Justice remains, quote, "open to resolving the plaintiff's claims through settlement and will continue our efforts to do so," end quote, and that the DOJ is continuing efforts at a, quote, out-of-court resolution, end quote. It's still possible the DOJ could settle the case, although it's already filed an appeal, but it's not clear what the next steps the department will take. In the meantime, many who work in the gun control advocacy space say the decision politically clouds the Biden administration's own stance on the importance of background checks. I mean, bottom line is, if they didn't do the background check, they should be held liable just as anybody else. So, you can't walk back on that. Anyway, Robert Cottrell, a professor at the law at the George Washington University, said the government's default position is to defend themselves against monetary claims. Yes, they are, because the government doesn't want to just pay out claims, because where does the money come from? It comes from you and I. But he acknowledged that the argument that the DOJ is making works against the administration politically. He said the following, quote, "I think it might make the administration's position politically more difficult." Yes, you think? I mean, on the one hand, they're saying we need to prosecute people for mistakes made regarding weapons and access to weapons. But then, as a DOJ, they're saying, no, we don't want to pay this. So Jamal Al-Safar, the attorney representing Sutherland Springs victims and their families, said that by appealing the ruling from the district judge, the DOJ is playing into the National Rifle Association's hands. Yes, I agree. He said, if the DOJ wins, we have substantially weakened the ability to enforce background check laws. The NRA's legislative arm released a statement saying the lawsuit, quote, forced the government to admit the inconvenient truths about the limitations of gun control. What an interesting phrasing. Inconvenient truth. You guys at NRA, you fail to acknowledge the inconvenient truth that it's your stance that puts guns in the hands of people over and over again to kill people as much as they want. And how disingenuous of you to use the term inconvenient truths as though stealing from Al Gore's book. Unbelievable. Yet believable. Unbelievable in the eyes of most people, but believable because the NRA has no backbone, doesn't care, doesn't really care about protecting people, only cares about whether people get guns and they can sell more guns. The NRA said it was significant that the Justice Department has argued that a background check on the shooter may not have stopped the shooting, and argued that the Air Force could not have known that the shooter had the potential to commit such a crime. Wait a minute. What did it say earlier here? Where's that line? Okay. It says up here, District Court ruled in 2021 that government was 60% responsible for the massacre after Devin Kelly, who was discharged from the U.S. Air Force after a felony conviction, wasn't entered into the national database that would have prevented him from buying a gun. Okay, so he had a felony conviction, the same thing that would have kept you or I or anybody else from having a gun. Definitely, because a felony is supposed to keep you from having a gun. And then here comes the NRA down here. Let me get back to that thing. Yeah, they're saying their argument is that the Air Force could not have known that the shooter had the potential to commit such a crime. Doesn't matter. He had a felony conviction while inside the Air Force. A felony conviction inside the Air Force should be treated the same way as a felony conviction in everyday society. He should not have had a gun. Doesn't matter whether they knew whether he can commit a crime or not. If he commits a felony in the Air Force, that should transfer out into public. He should not be able to have a gun. But the NRA continued, quote, both these admissions essentially negate any further claims by the Biden administration that firearm background checks have any essential role to play in public safety, end quote. Honestly, they will never do anything to protect people. All they care about is the sale of guns. Quote, the Biden DOJ is walking right into the NRA's trap. Why the DOJ wants to undermine the very important element of the Biden administration's gun safety policy is beyond me. That's a quote from Al-Safar. And Al-Safar is the attorney for the people who were victimized by the deaths of their loved ones. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, when asked about the DOJ's decision to appeal on Friday, referred the questions to the Justice Department, but she added that Biden, quote, continues to be committed on making sure that we address an issue that is affecting families across the country, communities across the country, which is gun violence, end quote. The article continues, President Biden has not commented on the case either, but has several times spoken about what he sees as the effectiveness of background checks. Early last year, for example, he said they help make sure, quote, the people who are not allowed to have a gun don't get a gun in the first place, end quote. And last summer, he signed a bipartisan bill that would expand background checks. Last February, a gun violence prevention task force meeting in New York Biden also commented on holding the gun lobby and gun manufacturers accountable. He said, quote, they have got to be held responsible for the things that they do that are irresponsible, end quote. The article continues that the government has settled and paid out victims from other mass shootings. It's not the first time that the government was held responsible. During the litigation in the Sutherland Springs case, the government paid out victims from 2018 shooting at high school in Parkland, Florida, and 2015 shooting at church in Charleston, South Carolina. DOJ said they appealed that they filed in this case, quote, the United States unequivocally does not seek to excuse the Air Force's failure to submit Kelly's fingerprints and record a conviction for inclusion into NICS databases. But they take issue with the ruling from the district court judge that found the government mostly responsible for the attack. They continued, quote, the United States is not liable for Kelly's actions and is certainly not more responsible for those acts than the murderer himself, end quote. The DOJ said, adding that the United States is not, quote, legally responsible, end quote, for the damages caused by this shooting. So it sounds like what they really want is they want to lessen the fine against the government. That's what it sounds like they want. Given the past settlements with victims and families from Parkland and Charleston, Al-Safar says his clients in Sutherland Springs should also get what they are owed. He said the following, quote, it makes zero sense on the law and the facts that the DOJ would resolve fairly with the families of Parkland and the families of South Carolina church massacre and not even approach the same fairness in our case. So that's going on. Not really liking that at all. We talked about the Biden case with the documents. So who is this special counsel that's looking into Biden? Because this article says that Robert Hur is the special counsel, and the other article mentions somebody different, so not really sure. Maybe this article will get into that and explain why there were two different names. This is Robert Hur. So Merrick Garland named Robert Hur a Trump appointee to investigate whether Biden improperly handled classified documents. And we got into this earlier about where the documents were located. After the news broke, Garland announced Hur's appointment and noted his long and distinguished career as a prosecutor, saying his appointment underscores for the public the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive manners and to making decisions indisputably guided only by the facts and the law. Now, again, earlier I mentioned listening to and watching Stephanie Miller in the past week. And this was, I believe, brought up on that show, that Garland appears to be very much into the idea of worrying about whether he looks political or not. I mean, he seems to worry a lot about whether he looks like he's showing political favoritism or not. And so he is very eager to jump to an investigation of the current president to prove that he's not looking political. so that the Republicans cannot make the charge that he is being political. Did he rush that quickly to avoid? Did he rush that quickly to appoint a special prosecutor for President Trump? No. He did exactly the opposite thing. He made sure to get all his ducks in a row and work everything out slowly and wait till all the evidence was in. And then finally, he appointed Jack Smith. So that's Garland, that's who he is. That's the way he's acting. Her, who currently serves as a litigation partner in Washington, D.C. law firm, said in a statement he would conduct the investigation, quote, swiftly and thoroughly with fair, impartial, and dispassionate judgment. Well, I sure hope so. The investigation comes as another special prosecutor looks into possible mishandling of classified documents and presidential records at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, as well as key aspects of the department's Jan 6 investigation. Yes, Jack Smith, of course. Here they go again. House Republicans responded with their own inquiry, saying that the DOJ appears to have handled the Trump investigation differently, and they questioned when the department first learned of the existence of the classified documents found in Biden's belongings. Hey, guys, Republicans, guys, they acted swiftly. As soon as they found the documents, they turned them over. The next day, the documents were picked up. That's what happened. That's what your investigation is going to show. On Friday, as part of their inquiry, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Rep. Jim Jordan, along with Rep. Mike Johnson, sent a letter to Garland asking for, quote, all documents and communications referring to or relating to the appointment, end quote, of her as the special counsel. Her was appointed by former President Trump, served as U.S. Attorney in Maryland, where he set strategic priorities and oversaw one of the largest and busiest U.S. Attorney offices in the country. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan praised his appointment, stating the following: former Maryland U.S. Attorney Robert Hur is a prosecutor of highest caliber and integrity. I have faith in his ability to get the facts and hold power to account. In this country, no one is above the law, end quote. He also spent time as a principal counselor to Rod Rosenstein, then Justice Department Justice's Deputy Attorney General under Trump administration, to oversee all components of the department. Part of the time as Rosenstein's top aide was spent overseeing the special counsel investigation into Russian election interference, meeting regularly with then special counsel Robert Mueller. Rosenstein told NPR, as all things considered, that the experience was particularly valuable in preparing her for his new role. Quote, so as a result of that, he learned how special counsel operates. He also was doing the job during a time when we were under a lot of political pressure from commentators and from politicians who were skeptical about the Russia investigation. So Rob has the experience of learning how to ignore that chatter and just keep focused on the things that matter. They didn't close the quote, but that has to be the close of the quote. He's a former Supreme Court clerk. So after graduating in 2001 from Stanford, he served as a law clerk for Judge Kozinski on the Ninth Circuit and Chief Justice Rehnquist, according to Justice Department records. He moved on to work with current FBI Director Wray, also a Trump appointee who was in charge of the Justice Department's criminal division. They worked on counterterrorism and corporate fraud cases along with appellate matters, according to the DOJ. So his record of working with all these people in the Trump administration generally ensures that if he finds Biden not guilty, then the Republicans should not be able to say a single thing, right, Republicans? Served as a government investigations litigator with the international law firm King and Spalding in Washington, D.C. 2 years before returning to DOJ as assistant U.S. attorney in Maryland. He prosecuted gang violence, firearms, and narcotics trafficking cases, as well as white-collar crimes such as financial institutions fraud, public corruption, and more, ultimately earning him Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award. He was appointed by Trump and unanimously confirmed by the Senate to be the chief federal prosecutor in Maryland until he resigned in February 2021. Worked as partner at Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher in Washington, serving as co-chair of the firm's crisis management group. So he has a lot on his resume. This is an interesting one because we talked about voting before. And that might just be, it's probably just me getting a notification, that little bell I heard. Okay. So this one is an interesting article because we talked about voting before. Despite voting changes, ballot rejections remain relatively low in 2022 midterms. Hundreds of thousands of mail ballots were rejected across the country during 2022 election, according to state analysis. 1% of the ballots that were returned to election officials, a rate similar to prior years. The analysis drew primarily from states that track ballot rejections on a statewide basis, provides an incomplete picture. That's because many states don't track this information. So, okay, got a couple of producer suggestions coming. For example, Illinois had shared data with NPR that showed a far higher rejection rate than other states. When asked about it, the officials initially retracted the data and reported Friday that they rejected 2.6% of returned mail ballots in the last election. A federal report later this year will provide more data. So this column on the side shows how many were rejected with percentages below 1%, some higher. So far, like most of them are below 1%. Some are higher. There's Texas with 2.7%, interestingly, a Republican state. Some are much less than 1%. But I think you can tell from that list, like, look at the states that are not on this list. Like Florida is not on this list. Tennessee is not on this list, and there's quite a few others that are not on that list. So they're not all telling you. Okay, we have a couple of producer suggestions. So let me make those go where they need to go. So, click, click, click. Come on. Okay. This one is an interesting tweet about criminal indictments. Is that right? Let me see which one is. No, I think I grabbed the wrong page. Hang on, let me try that again. I'm glad I checked that before I put that on air. Okay, let me make that bigger before I put it on air so that you can see it. So this little statistic comes from Rocky Mountain Mike. Some of you might recognize Rocky Mountain Mike as the parody creator that is often used on Stephanie Miller's show. He posts these statistics about criminal indictments and which indictments? 215 criminal indictments for Donald Trump, 76 for Richard Nixon, 26 for Ronald Reagan, 16 for George Bush, 2 for Bill Clinton, 1 for George Herbert Walker Bush, 1 for Gerald Ford, 1 for Jimmy Carter, 0 for Barack Obama, and 0 for Joseph Biden. And if you note up here at the top of the screen, there's an asterisk next to that 215, which it says at the bottom of the screen, more indictments pending. So yeah, there's your comparison about how many people have had indictments. Also, did we get more stuff from a producer? No. Okay, those are the ones we got from the producer. Oh, yes. This is the latest thing going around. You know, just because there's a new policy that's trying to eliminate gas stoves, then we have the idea that somehow, you know, that's retroactive. And so, by courtesy of Ron Filipowski, we have the latest thing coming from Governor DeSantis, where he makes this argument. And so, here we go. Let me mute my mic.
You're not taking our gas stoves away from us. That is your choice. And I know many people who cook a lot do not want to part with their gas stoves. And so we're going to stand up for that.
No one is trying to take away your gas stove. All we're saying is let's not have more gas stoves, because it would be a lot better for children if we protected them from the risk of the side effects of having a gas stove. Because what happened this week is we had this report out about how a certain percentage of children develop more allergies because of the byproducts produced by a gas stove. But it is, always the case that unless there is some kind of recall, you don't really take back something that's already been issued and sold. You might prevent somebody from buying another gas stove when their gas stove has to be replaced, but you can't very well take away the gas stove they already have. So there's that to consider. And there's also, the idea that the reason there is a certain percentage of kids who have these allergic reactions to the byproducts of the gas stove is because not everybody has one. And in a world where you're trying to reduce the demand on electricity, and in a world where you're trying to find new ways as a parent to reduce your cost as everything goes up, it would generally behoove somebody to think about and consider doing a gas stove. But if it's making it safer to eliminate having gas stoves and try to make everything electric and try to eliminate that technology in the future and try to get people to put solar power on their roof to power the electricity, to do that to reduce their electric bill, then it's better to do so. That's what the government is trying to do. So, okay, we have another producer suggestion coming through. And okay, let's see. Okay, so the latest from the former president. Shall I try to do it in his voice tonight, despite the fact that my throat's been acting up? No, I don't think so. I think I'll just read it. So this is from Truth Social. With all that's been stated on pages 1 and 2 of Truth Social, and with all of the evidence leading to the fact that I did nothing wrong, your words, former President Trump, and Joe did, again, your words, former President Trump, our nation has become an investigation nightmare, despite the many other problems we have, which are many. It is now time for the USA to stop these ridiculous investigations, and that includes those DC-inspired local and state witch hunts, and get back to the business of properly running our country. So basically, in an effort to try to get himself off, he's saying, don't investigate Joe either. I know, Jim. Betty says, spare your pipes. And Jim says, fuck Truth Social. Yes. Yes, Jim. Yeah, I know. I know you don't like to see anything he has to say, Jim. I get it. So here's another one coming in from the producer team. And 1 second. Let the computer transfer it over. This also comes through Ron Filipowski. Ron Filipowski prefaces it by saying, Junior, with his finger on the pulse of the American people. So Donald Trump says, Don will do a great job. He feels the pulse of what's happening. Give it a shot. And so Donald Trump Jr. says he's launching a new podcast, Triggered, with Don Jr. later this month. All I have to do is steal from him and say, guys, don't watch this podcast. Watch this podcast. Tune into this podcast. Like and subscribe to this podcast. Share this podcast among your friends. So, like and subscribe. And don't forget to click the thumbs up. So this is another interesting article. NPR Politics says the Trump organization has been ordered to pay $1.6 million in fines and penalties after a Manhattan jury found the company guilty of tax fraud. You want to delve into that article or just be happy with the headline? This is another one. Prosecutors and defense lawyers delivered opening statements Thursday in the seditious conspiracy case involving members of the far-right Proud Boys group and their actions during the Jan 6 insurrection. So that's an article there. There's more. We read that earlier about Robert Hur. We read that about the ballots. For some reason, these are repeating. Curious what's in among the notifications. Texas brewery receives a flood of threats and harassment after concealing Kyle Rittenhouse event. Terrified Trump flies into rage on Truth Social as Jack Smith closes in. So that's an article, but I'm not sure who that's from. Maybe just read some new tweets. There's an interesting question. Who's the dumbest member of Congress? Do you think it's Marjorie Taylor Greene or Boebert? Put your comments. Greene or Boebert? Oh, you could have a litany of things. Aaron says Boebert. Name one thing that Donald Trump has ruined. I think if you could only name one thing, I would say his entire life. Those are just general stuff. I'll close that off for a little while. Remove that for a while. Maybe just jump into the Twitterverse and see what's popping up right now. And if it's worthwhile, we'll talk about it. Nancy Pelosi tweeted yesterday, as savage storms take lives and threaten livelihoods in California and across the nation, we mourn the families, thank emergency responders, and we act. Democrats choose science over fear to make unprecedented investments in climate action for resources and recovery, and will do more. This one's probably humorous. Let's see. Because this may be the favorite video of the night. So let's see. I'll stop it. I have no idea what the sound is. So let me put that in. Yeah, it's still shareable. Okay, good. Because when you see what it is, you'll go, this should be fun and interesting. So just a little bit of fun and interesting stuff. I'm going to mute my microphone. You can see my reaction. The caption on that read said that should be the new emergency alert system. How many of you think that should be the new emergency alert system? Cat making that sound. Oh, I see why. On this date, 51 years ago, Emergency premiered on NBC, so that was why. So there's just some things. Okay, what are the other trends? Next trend is disappointed. Do we want to talk about that or not? This relates to tomorrow. See if I can scale that up so you can read it. Martin Luther King Jr. III says, I remember my father for the ideals that he held, and I know that if he were here today, he would be proud of our progress, but deeply disappointed by some of our failures. That is why we must continue to fight for peace, justice, and equity. Happy birthday, Dad. So there's that. That is a good one to bring up. What else do we have? Another producer suggestions. There's a different tweet on that as I pull in a couple of producer suggestions or check on those. So President Biden goes, like many Americans, sorry, that's so small. Let me make it bigger. Like many Americans, I was disappointed that the first bill Republicans in the House passed would help wealthy people cheat on their taxes and add $114 billion to the deficit. House Republicans campaigned on inflation. They didn't say if elected, their plan was to make it worse. Right on, Mr. President. I think we're getting more things coming in from our producers. While I handle those, I did have a request from somebody to talk about is all communication progress, discourse, arguments, legal or otherwise, debate. Can verbal fighting ever be good? Verbal fighting, if you keep it as civil discourse, is good. But if you get off topic and just fight with each other just to fight, it's not good. One of the other suggestions I had for tonight is, do we really care much about Twitter? We do, obviously, because we see a lot of things on Twitter that we talk about as topics. And there was a question about saying something about inflation and recession, which our producers have handled. So we're dealing with that as well. And so, you know, actual suggestions do come across as topics. So we have those coming through. Okay. So we talked about that. Go back to that. This next one is called One of These Things. Okay, this is good visual evidence. So we have a good visual comparison of the charges against the former and the current president, or the alleged charges. So let me scale that up to where it's going to look good on the thing. So Brooklyn Dad goes, and I can make that bigger still. Only morons fail to see the difference. The Biden classified documents, like a few documents in a folder. Trump classified documents, many folders. Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture, she says. She's a moron. This one is called DeSantis Gone Nuts. So again, this is a little video from Ron DeSantis. Okay. Ron Filipowski prefaces, DeSantis announces he will seek to have the legislature authorize him to appoint a state board to take over the district where Disney World has had self-governing authority since it was created. So he's still trying to take over the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Let me mute my microphone.
So, what I said was last year that Disney will no longer have its own government. Disney will live under the same laws as everybody else, and Disney will pay the debts and taxes. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So the question was always, is it going to be under state control or local control? I actually initially, when we did the bill to sunset it, and we knew we were going to have to take additional action, I was agnostic between those. But then what started happening was you had Orange County saying they were going to raise people's taxes by thousands of dollars and doing this. Now, I think that was all a dog and pony show. But then I'm thinking to myself, is that really something that I want to allow them to be able to do? Do I trust them being able to handle the municipal debt and all this stuff? And so I don't have a lot of confidence in that. So it's going to be a state control board. There's absolutely going to be accountability. The corporate kingdom has come to an end, and that will be the case when this is enacted.
Okay, so he's going to try to say that there's a state board, and he's going to try to say that the counties don't have to raise their fees or whatnot. For the person watching this who is not residing in Florida, and more specifically for a person not residing in the portion of the state of Florida that the Reedy Creek Improvement District resides within. If you've never seen this story. Back when Walt Disney World was created, in order to keep it quiet, the Reedy Creek Improvement District was created. That's part of what went on. What it does is it gives autonomy to what became Disney World to control everything that happens on its property. So essentially, you had all these people acting on Disney's behalf who went out and bought the property that became Disney World. The people who bought it in their name transferred the property over to Disney. The Reedy Creek Improvement District was made. It allowed Disney to control its fire department, its police department, its water, its sewage, everything, so that it could always control everything, so that wherever it was, there wasn't like a county taxing agency deciding what to do about it or raising its taxes or anything of that sort. Gave them complete control so they could knock down buildings, build new buildings, do everything without having to go through the normal processes that an ordinary city would have to go through. And it was designed to keep them out of taxes so that they could keep the cost down for the people visiting back in the day, and so that they could do what they were doing to bring more tourism to the state, which would fill up the hotels and allow the hotels to collect tax money for people staying there, which would go into the state coffers, which would improve the state. But he don't like them because he don't like their policies on the rights of people of gay and alternative lifestyles. So he wants to punish them. And he thinks that he can wipe out this district. And he doesn't even consider the fact that in doing so and in wiping out the district, he's basically saying you have to close the fire department that's there, you have to close the police department that's there, you have to close the water department that's there, you have to close the sewage department that's there, and all of those things will have to be incorporated under the cities or the county. And the county and the city both said, okay, part of this resides on Orange County and part of it resides on Osceola County. And we gotta take up the slack because you just dissolved all these agencies with your stroke of your pen. And you're saying we got to do all this stuff on our own. So now we got to hire the people that did all these jobs. So that's why they wanted to raise their taxes, because they got to raise their taxes somewhere to pay for all that. And he's saying now, no, the state will do this or that. So what's he going to do? Create a state agency to do the police and the fire and the water and the treatment of the water and all the other things it has to do? He's clueless. All he cares about is his political power, because plain and simple, the only thing Governor DeSantis cares about is boosting his political capital so that he can run for president. That's all he cares about. That's all he cares about. This one is called Rob Reiner is Always Right. Rob Reiner tweeted the following: the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is Joe Biden is a decent law-abiding person and Donald Trump is a pathologically lying criminal. Yep, he definitely is right. Okay, so destroy imagination too, says Nick Rich. Yep. Jim says Disney has to slow walk everything until DeSantis goes away. ADM FLA GURL 38 says that will put tourism down the drain. They will all leave Florida. Nick Rich 56 says raise Ron's taxes. I'd like to, Nick Rich. Jim the Greek says because it was in the middle of nowhere. There are people who I've talked to who whine and complain about the existence of Disney World because it used to be private property that was all swampland, and they snuck onto said private property to hunt and kill animals. So they're mad because that's gone. So we have another producer suggestion. How much money has his wife's charity taken since the election? That would be an interesting thing to look into. This next video comes to us from Free Speech TV, so I hope Free Speech TV doesn't mind us using this video. So I'm going to mute my mic. Okay, so I'm going to show that again, just with the audio off, because that had music on it instead of someone speaking. So give me a second. Put the mouse in the right place. Mute the audio. And see if I can read really fast. So here we go. Try to read it really, really fast. Trump Organization sentenced to pay $1.61 million. Can't read that fast. Trump Organization sentenced to pay $1.6 million for tax fraud. NPR reports that on January 13, the Manhattan Criminal Court ordered 2 of Trump's companies to pay the combined amount for tax fraud. Payment is due within 14 days of sentencing. This conviction was consequential, the first time ever for a criminal conviction of former President Trump's companies, said Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, via statement. However, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg thinks the organization's fine, which is the most allowed per state sentencing guidelines, isn't enough. Our laws in the state need to change in order to capture this type of decade-plus systemic and egregious fraud, said Alvin Bragg in a Manhattan District Attorney statement. The Trump Organization spokesperson Kimberly Benza said the company intends to appeal. No surprise there. New York's become the crime and murder capital of the world, yet these politically motivated prosecutors will stop at nothing to get President Trump and continue the never-ending witch hunt which began the day he announced the presidency. That must have been her quote. The Trump Organization's longtime chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, was sentenced to 5 months in prison earlier this week for his role in the tax fraud scheme. Benza previously referred to Weisselberg as a victim of the ordeal. Alan Weisselberg is a victim, Benza said. He was threatened, intimidated, and terrorized. Kimberly Benza, again being the Trump Organization spokesperson and giving this via statement. She continued, he was given a choice of pleading guilty and serving 90 days in prison or serving the rest of his life in jail. All of this over a corporate car and standard employee benefits. Well, let me tell you, Ms. Benza, the rest of us all have to do what we have to do. If we get a corporate car or we get extra benefits, we got to pay the taxes on them. I know this for a fact because instead of getting a corporate cell phone, I get a stipend to pay for my cell phone because I have to have a cell phone for my job. If I got the cell phone handed to me, then I would have to pay taxes on the payments for the cell phone. But because I get a stipend from a job, because I need a cell phone for a portion of its use, I'm already paying the taxes on that. So I'm getting a stipend that's a fixed stipend, and I'm paying the taxes on that. And I don't have to worry about, submitting a bunch of documents and forms and stuff like that, saying, well, the price of this increased, so now I have to pay more taxes or whatever. So if I got to pay taxes on my cell phone, he's got to pay taxes on his corporate car. And he's got to pay taxes on his benefits. And if he didn't do that, then he should be serving prison for not doing that. So thank you, Free Speech TV, for that ad. And thank you to our producer team for bringing that to our attention. Hope you didn't mind me reading that, but I figured, in some ways that goes by real fast. I don't know what type of screen you're using at home, so I think it's good to go on that. And I also didn't know if the music shouldn't be copyrighted. It should be, licensing free, but again, I'm not the one paying the licensing, so I don't want blackouts like we got last week when we aired copyrighted material and things black out. I mean, everybody was able to watch stuff after the fact, but if you can't watch during the show, that kind of takes the fun out of it. So that's what we got going on. Sound like canned music? Yeah, it's what we call in the business network music. It should be okay, but you just kind of wonder, I mean, I should be able to use it without worry, and the stuff we aired last week where the screen went black and the sound deadened off, all of that stuff was okay. It's just that there's something going on new on YouTube that apparently, when you air any copyrighted material that's flagged, then your channel goes black for a few seconds and you get no sound, and then it comes back. So if you wondered what happened last week, that's what happened last week. But everything went through with flying colors. So if you missed anything last week, you could go back and watch the video because it's still there. So that's just the way it goes. That's the way that we get things nowadays. So more stuff coming in from the producers. You're worried I'm going to eliminate the first run? No, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to avoid showing stuff that I know is definitely copyrighted. Like, I saw that some of you want to talk about stuff that aired on 60 Minutes. So instead of actually talking about what aired on 60 Minutes, I'll tell you to go watch 60 Minutes on CBS. Go to cbs.com, watch 60 Minutes, watch the video about fusion power, and find out what's new on the horizon in terms of sources of energy. But you will not see it on this show because I will not deal with CBS blocking my show because of content. Or tune into some other show that has the rights to show the content. So this one I have to format for seeing on the screen. And this one comes from Fox News. So I solo and take my mic out.
Really showing their colors. They're a bunch of blue anons, conspiracy theorists that have these witch hunts and hoax that they chase after. The Democrats' double standard is out of control. They wanted Trump in jail over classified documents, and with Biden, it's let's wait and see. They attacked Don Jr. and praised the crackhead gun criminal Hunter Biden. And really showing their colors. They're a bunch of blue anons, conspiracy theorists that have these witch hunts and hoax that they chase after. The Democrats' double standard is out of control. They wanted Trump in jail over classified documents, and with Biden, it's let's wait and see. They attacked Don Jr. and praised the crackhead gun criminal Hunter Biden. And really.
So apparently in Boebert court, there is no innocent until proven guilty because, she's already convicted the president's son of a crime. And, And I love that phrase witch hunt, because every time somebody on the Republican Party says witch hunt, you're only admitting that you've mesmerized your party and, you know, put your spell on them to get them to vote your way. So just real witches, people who practice Wiccan things are probably offended too. I would be if I were them. Yes, Casper, pretty sure leading an insurrection tops classified documents. Nick Rich says bobblehead has no clue about anything but Q. Yes. Benny Loco says no, we want him in prison for high treason, Bobo. Nick Rich says the copyright algorithm must be complex. It is, Nick Rich, because it's looking for some kind of digital signature that allows it to identify things. Can Wiccan sue Donnie for defamation? That's a good one, Benny Loco. I don't know. That would be interesting to find out if they can sue him for defamation. Can you imagine the quality of people Bobo has for her staff? I can imagine, but I don't want to see the picture of them, Jim. Anyway. So, what else do you want to talk about? And producers, if you want to throw us some more stories, by all means, throw us some more. What else do you want to talk about tonight? I have a tremendous office. This is something that Wes Webb sent me. I know this is cluttered, but I almost wish I had something like that. But I'll work on that at some point. At some point, I'll actually say, yes, this is my real surroundings. Just haven't worked that up yet. What about an audible search to determine plagiarism? Algorithms for that. That would be interesting, Nick Rich, 56. Are Republicans really trying to do away with ethics committees? It does make you wonder, Casper, doesn't it? It does make you wonder. The next topic coming in is we all need to relax. That should be interesting. What do you mean that's not your house? Are you broadcasting from someone else's house? It's just it's a virtual background, and this is a green glass, and when I put the green glass in, you see the background appears. So it's all virtual. But yeah, it was provided by one of our viewers. So that's what you're seeing. It's not real. I'm real, but that is not what's really behind me. That's what I mean. So the next one is called We All Need to Relax. That should be interesting. Oh, this is pretty. This is a good happy little video for the show. It's always good to have a few happy little videos to add some relaxation to the show. So let me mute my microphone so that you Would help to turn the microphone on. The song that was playing under that was Come and Get Your Love. So just in case it was copyrighted out, that's what's playing underneath the bunny and the lettuce. W. Did you send that twice, producer? It seems like I got the same thing twice. I'm going to check it out before I bring that in. So I'll just look at that while you all talk amongst yourselves. Talk amongst yourselves. Yep, it's the same video. Okay, so I got the same submission twice. Okay. Okay. So if they muted it out because it was a classic song, let me look up who sang that song so that if for some reason they muted that out. Who sang Come and Get Your Love?
Come and Get Your Love was recorded by
Redbone. Okay. So Come and Get Your Love by Redbone. Look that up if you didn't hear the music earlier. Because that's a good old song. Hi, Ira. Okay. So. Ba-dum-bum-bum. We didn't miss anything. Nothing new. Nothing new over there. What are we talking about now? We just been doing stuff from producers. Jim says, "Hi, hoity-toity Ken has producers now." Yes, I have producers now. Producers help me get new topics if we get through a topic too quickly, and so that's what happens. So yeah, we have producers. I know the current government doesn't seem to understand how industrial action works, says Casper Northerner. So sometimes when the chat is going by, I wish the chat was like closer to where I'm looking at myself on the screen because the chat is off on the side, but it's not too bad. And our show is got a low audience count, so it makes it fairly easier to keep up with your chat. Cassler says they're trying to ban strikes in the UK, making unions ineffective. Oh, that's sad. Benny says road trip. Benny and company are talking about road trip. Nope, haven't read that book, Ira. So what are you doing tomorrow on your Martin Luther King Day? Anything special? Put that in chat. Put that in chat if you're doing something special for tomorrow. And don't all write at once, because now I'm moving another producer suggestion, so hang on there. What's the next flight doing? Asked Nick Rich. Today's flight was for the Space Force, was a secret payload, so that just went up before the show. Nothing special for tomorrow, says Wes Webb. Jim says, need to do some banking things, but the banks are closed tomorrow. Yep, that's the way. Wes says usually gets groceries on Monday, but not since schools is still out. Okay, so we had this come in from our producers. It's called Don't See This Very Often. This again is another animal video. Extraordinary white moose was spotted taking a dip in the pool in Sweden's Värmland County. Video was taken by Hans Nielsen. So that's the caption on the video. That's extraordinary. Casper is still talking about the strikes in the UK. There's talk of coordinated strikes between different industries. A general strike is already illegal. They passed a police and crime bill restricting protest. Wes Webb thinks the video is cool. Nick Rich says the live streams are great. Jim says, you know it farted when it shook off. Probably. Castor says the Tories are only good for Tories. Are the Tories basically the so-called conservative party? I think so. In your UK. Ghost moose. Yeah, I thought that moose looked awfully light in color. I don't know if it was just the quality of the video or not, because I thought a moose was more of a darker color, but I guess they come in different colors too. Benny Loco says it's time to eat the rich. But Jim says, bet they're all marbled, so probably can't. Casper says, yes, the Tories are the conservative party. Fake outrage over things beyond our control isn't helpful. Make our community stronger by taking care of each other. Albino moose, methinks, says Nick Rich. I tend to agree with you, Nick. Makes me probably have to, resort to watching some animal television, more stuff about animals. What's my favorite movie? I've said it before. I'll give you a hint. There's a Disney ride that opens that's dedicated to it that opens on April 4th. That's your hint. So, is that 2 or 1? That was 1. So this is the closest photo of Saturn ever taken, it says, and I'm going to have to make the screen bigger. This comes from Amazing Astronomy. Can I get the whole photo in? Pretty much. That's pretty good. Amazing Astronomy. Closest photo of Saturn. Closest photo of Saturn ever taken. Pretty neat. I mean, that's like being in your house and using your macro camera to take a picture of your globe. Can we see the albino moose again? Albino moose are sacred to indigenous population. If you can hear that, that's my neighbor revving up his engine. If you can't hear it, you're lucky. You're not able to have to hear it. Yep, you can see the albino moose more than once. I love space photos. I'm afraid of space. It makes everything going on here seem insignificant. Yeah, in some respects it is. Not albino, just white. I thought it was a weed whacker. It is a weed whacker of sorts. He or she would eat weeds, I'm sure. Yes, it is a majestic looking animal. Hi, Stig Prod over on Twitch. I'm good. Stig Prod, all the others are over on YouTube if you want to join them. What's my YouTube? I should type that in. I'll type that in as a banner. Hang on. It's that's my YouTube. So if you put it in without the ad symbol, it should find it. And then you want to go to the live channel on that channel. You want to go to the live tab on that channel. If for some strange reason you're coming in from a browser, then you want to put in the whole www.youtube.com and / it, and then put in that at. You're welcome. Hey, welcome to YouTube. I think we got another suggestion from the producers. The biggest thing you'd have in Ireland is wild deer. I think, yep. So this is Trump ranting on about something that the sheriff calls the Southern White House. He says Mar-a-Lago is a walled fortress built with, quote, unlimited money. Dude, if you think you have access to unlimited money, wait until your sorry ass is convicted. With the idea that it would one day be the Southern White House. I guess that turned out to be true. In addition to locks and a strong structural setting, I have security and Secret Service is there full time. Compare that to a flimsy garage with no security and papers strewn all over the floor. Dude, seriously. Your place is where the papers were on the floor. Easy access for anyone. Also, he had them for 6 years in many different places. I arrived to MAL with papers as president. No, you did not. Not if you took them after the fact when you were no longer president. And we are going to prove that. Honest to goodness, that man is a horrible man. Love traveling to remote communities. Floated bamboozler of Magalardo can eat. Yes, he can, Nick Rich. So anyway, where's my favorite place to travel? Usually to relatives' houses. A lot of people are kind of like surprised when they hear me say that, but it's being with family. Almost 3 hours at this. Jim says that's not an albino moose. It's just a white moose. Albino moose have red eyes. Well, I've been at this for 3 hours. I think that we should probably reconvene it next week. And that's what we're going to do. So we'll come back next week with new topics. I'd like to thank all of you who participated in tonight's show. I'd like to thank the producers who work behind the scenes. And I'd like to thank the moderation team. And now I get to show you a brand new close to the show, which has new pictures in it, including pictures of a Falcon 9 rocket launch, 2 pictures of the engine fire from the Artemis 1 mission, and a picture of a lunar eclipse. So I did not put any captions on them. So when you see the gray background and the rocket going up, that's the Falcon 9. When you see the orange trail, that's the Artemis 1 rocket. And when you see what looks like half of a moon, where it's just the lower half, like I took a saw and cut half of the moon away and you're only seeing the lower half, that's the moon. And I used an original Minolta X370 camera and the latest Kodak film to make these pictures. And then they were digitized by the processing lab. So that's why, even though the Artemis flew back in November, I'm finally now able to get this up. So tonight we have a new close to the show. So here we go with the close to the show.